Today I've put together 20 underrated indie games of 2025, the must-play hidden gems that flew under the radar but deliver next-level creativity and unforgettable gameplay. If you could, please subscribe and ring the bell. Also leave a like if you like the content. Alright, Guns of Fury, the two-person passion project that quietly hit Steam and switched back in February 2025 and still feels criminally overlooked. Picture Metal Slug's bullet hell, run and gun fused with a sprawling Metroidvania map, all wrapped in gorgeous 16-bit pixel art and backed by an 80s synth rock soundtrack from Dominic Neimark. You step into the combat boots of Vincent Fury, a special operative on a mission to rescue the kidnapped Dr. Klaus, recover the world-saving Tetris cell, and blow up every corporate goon standing in your way. I slotted this one onto my underrated list because it's exactly the kind of indie gem that delivers big thrills without a billboard. Early patches threw in a late-game teleporter item, color-coded maps, and clear NPC hints to ease the backtracking grind. The April update even trimmed some boss health and rebalanced accessories after folks called out weird difficulty spikes around the Foundry. Praise always lands on that addictive boss design. I've never seen an 8-bit machine gun fight feel this cinematic, and the sheer joy of uncovering breakable shortcuts. The original fast travel points were miles apart, literally, and the UI could feel clunky when you're juggling 8 weapon types and 50 unlockables. Still, every patch has made the journey smoother without dulling the challenge. If you're hunting an indie that marries retro thrills with modern Metroidvania depth, Guns of Fury is one you'll want to carve into your backlog. Just don't be surprised when you lose a weekend chasing that last secret weapon. Alright, let's slide into Metal Bringer, the voxel pixel roguelike action surprise that quietly blasted on his Steam in March 2025. You play Surya, a girl thawed from cryosleep a millennium after humanity buried itself underground, and you're tasked with building androids called Labor, piloting hulking mech. Why is it on this underrated list? Because despite glowing, very positive tags on Steam, Metal Bringer never got the spotlight it deserved. Most folks never even saw the trailer. Once the game went live, the community buzz spread through word of mouth. Players couldn't stop talking about how satisfying it feels to mix and match mech limbs on the fly, or nail a perfectly timed grappling hook dodge when a laser wall closes in. Some called out the steep learning curve in the early floors and a vague onboarding that dumped you into combat. The devs listened. A pre-launch patch bolstered tutorials, smoothed UI elements, and even added small story beats in the first zone to give Surya a bit more personality. ARM critics point to a short post-game, an unbalanced difficulty spike around mid-runs, an itch for more late-game floor. If you're into mech customization, tight roguelike loops, and a soundtrack that pulses with every enemy shatter, Metal Bringer is the hidden gem of 2025 you need to suit up for. If you've ever want to feel like your brain was being split in half, in the best way possible, Ambidextro delivers that experience with style. Released on March 28th, this precision platformer allows you to control 2 characters at once, one with each hand. Sounds simple, right? Until you realize your left thumb is trying to dodge spikes while your right is solving a mirrored puzzle under a time limit. It's like playing co-op with yourself, and somehow still arguing over who messed up. I included Ambidextro because it's one of those rare indies that takes a gimmick and turns it into a full-blown gameplay philosophy. 100 levels of increasingly brutal, single-screen challenges that test your coordination, timing, and ability to not rage quit when your fingers betray you. Steam reviews hit overwhelmingly positive, with players praising the minimalist design, Dungeon Synth soundtrack, and the sheer satisfaction of nailing a perfect run. Ambidextro is tighter, meaner, and way more focused on mechanical mastery. The devs clearly learned from past experiments and doubled down on what works. Short levels, snappy resets, and a control scheme that makes you feel like a wizard or a klutz depending on the moment. Some players found the difficulty curve a bit steep, especially around level 30, when the game starts demanding near-perfect sync. The lack of accessibility options also raised eyebrows. If you got motor limitations, this one's a tough sell. But for those who thrive on challenge, it's a brain workout worth sweating through. If you're looking for an indie that'll make you question your hand-eye coordination and maybe your life choices, Ambidextro is the one to try. Garden of Witches might be the cozy chaos you didn't know you needed. Released in early access on May 25th, this one comes from Team Tapas, the folks behind Bistro Heroes and A Girl Adrift, and it's got that same hand-drawn charm. but now wrapped around a fast-paced action loop with a surprisingly emotional core. You play as Syl, who's basically the only one in her coven willing to clean up the mess left by a bunch of lazy witches. The garden's falling apart, and the only way to fix it? Beat the others into attending a magical tea party. I included this one because it's got heart. It's not just another Hades Light. It's a roguelike that leans into narrative without sacrificing gameplay. Each run lets you experiment with scissors-based melee, spell combos, and relic synergies that feel genuinely strategic. The synergy system is wild. You can stack effects like burning, summoning crows, or triggering buffs mid-dash, and it rewards creativity more than brute force. The game's 5 chapters are already live, and while the devs promise more in-game content later this year, what's here already feels like a full experience. Post-launch, the sentiment's been overwhelmingly positive, with players loving the expressive character portraits, jazzy soundtrack, and the way each witch boss has a distinct personality and combat style. The devs have been super responsive, even teasing a card-based stat system and side missions in the 7.0 update. The melee feels a bit clunky compared to spell builds, and the dash cooldown can make boss fights feel punishing unless you luck into the right evasion spell. You can feel the DNA of Team Topaz's earlier games. Quirky characters, soft world building, and a love for cozy aesthetics. If you're looking for a game that blends charm, challenge, and a little bit of witchy weirdness, this one's worth planting in your library. Alright, let's dive into Dragon is Dead. Picture a pixel-perfect roguelite that marries Dead Cell's lightning-fast combat with Diablo's sweet loot pinch, then drops you into a gritty 2D castle crawl. It left early access on June 6th, after a year of community-driven tweaks. Think UI polish, combat balance, and a final chapter tease by PM Studios and Team Sunneat. I slotted it here because while it never grabbed the spotlight, it quietly hooked a dedicated few with its gear on death twist and feral synergy builds. There were some early translation hiccups and a skeletal narrative. After launch, the vibe settled into solid but niche, with praise for fluid dodge frames and mythic tier loot offsets to grumbles about repeating rooms and text-heavy lore. And there's also deep artifact synergies that let you craft wildly varied builds. They've trimmed the fat, sharpened the combat, and added a feral new heroine, mythic tier loot, a quenching upgrade system, and 16 tiers of nightmare in-game challenges. Is it perfect? No. But beneath that gritty pixel skin beats a roguelite heart that refuses to give up. Alright, picture FTL stripped of its neon polish and dunked in grimdark cathedral blood. Welcome to Void War. It soft launched on June 2nd. No fuel bars here. Every sector's a branching path, so you're always deciding between cultist shrines, pirate ambushes, or trading grim artifacts. I dropped it on this underrated list because while everyone chases the next Souls-like, Void War quietly hooked a cult with its boarding-first combat. You deck out psychers, necromancers, and cyborg zealots, then hurl them through pods like living torpedoes. If you lose a run, you keep the gear, so even defeats feel like progress. Popular sentiment painted it as FTL meets Warhammer 40k, and yeah, that's exactly what you get. Gothic ships, skull-strewn decks, and techno-magical rituals. Post-launch, players rave about the feral synergy builds and brutal torments mode. Though there's some issues like tiny UI icons, cluttered tooltips, and the occasional crash during massive boarding melees. Whether you're farming bone-throwing dervishes or smashing protocols with psychic bolts, Void War has carved its niche and climbs right up my must-play list. If you ever wanted to play a retro shooter that feels like Marathon got dunked in a vat of Evangelion and then handed a tactical gun manual, Beyond Citadel is your fever dream come true. Released in January 2025, this sequel to the Citadel doesn't just build on its predecessor. It goes full cyberpunk apocalypse and asks you to shoot your way through it with a carbine that jams if you don't treat it right. You play as the Martyr, a clone soldier sent to dismantle the trumpeters of the apocalypse, who've turned Earth into a biomechanical wasteland. You can lean around corners and manually eject magazines like a gun nerd's fantasy. I included this one because it's not just underrated, but beneath the shock factor is some of the most satisfying tactical gunplay I've seen in an indie shooter. You're not just blasting enemies, you're managing oxygen levels, manually cycling bolts, and praying your magazine didn't break mid-fight. Post-launch, it hit overwhelmingly positive on Steam, topping the new and trending charts. Players praised the weapon handling, level design, and the sheer scale. Critics loved the pacing and combat rhythm, though flagged the final act's movement gimmick as awkward. The translation's a bit janky, and the story's cryptic unless you're deep into the lore rabbit hole. But that's part of the charm. Compared to the Citadel, this is a massive upgrade. The environments are bigger, the combat tighter, and the narrative more ambitious, even if it occasionally trips over its own philosophical monologue. But the dev, Dokromori, has been transparent about his inspirations, from Ghost in the Shell to Blame. If you're into shooters that make you feel like a tactical god one moment and a confused clone the next, Beyond Citadel is a must-play. Next on our list is Doll's Nest. Nitroplus's leap from visual novels into full-blown mecha-girl action, quietly emerging in spring 2025 after a last-minute delay to polish the Unreal Engine build. You drop into the colossal, crater-like world of HOD as a customizable frame unit, scavenging parts, managing a shared energy pool for dodges and weapon swings, and unraveling the eerie mysteries buried in its industrial ruins. Think Nier, Automata's tension crossed with Armored Core's build crafting, all wrapped in brutalist voxel art that Game 8 called hauntingly beautiful and worth the price alone. I had to feature Doll's Nest because it flew under most gamers' radars despite earning a solid, very positive stamp on Steam. Post-release patches have already smoothed crashes, fixed disappearing story items, and teased new NPCs in Steam update notes. Players rave about the depth of customization, choosing frames, limbs, weapons, and modules to suit every shard drain boss fight, plus the slow burn storytelling through environmental lore and the moody soundtrack. Critics, however, point to giant maps with zero hand-holding, inconsistent onboarding, and some stutters on mid-range rigs. Here, they traded taboo themes for tactical shoot and survive. By the weekend, you can blaze through its dozen zones, cherry-pick rare parts, and still crave more thanks to multiple endings and a post-game challenge, likely coming in DLC. If you've ever wanted to build the perfect mech waifu, flirt with despair in a silent factory, then barricade yourself against the next creeping horror, Doll's Nest is the hidden indie gem of 2025 you shouldn't miss. Alright, let's talk about Jump King Quest, the audacious title that dropped into Steam Early Access earlier this year on February 12th, and somehow snuck under most radars. On paper, it's still that merciless vertical climb, momentum-based jumps, Pit of Doom resets, but Nexile grafted on RPG-light stats, Soul-style combat, and a sprawling world called the Heights. You're not just chasing this smoking hot babe at the top anymore. You've got weapons to swing, armor to upgrade, and parrying to master. And yes, it finally added online co-op and PvP, so friends can save you or send you plummeting back to square one. I threw this one onto the list because it's criminally underrated. Despite earning a very positive tag on Steam, early buzz came from a January playtest and was praised for the game's sheer ambition. Dynamic multiplayer, build customization, hidden shortcuts woven into every pixel, and over a dozen unique zones. The dopamine rush when you parry a Frog Knight in midair and nail that next jump is great. Of course, it hasn't been flawless. The move from pure platforming to full-blown combat rubbed purists the wrong way. Had to patch clunky UI, balance overpowered stats, and smooth out netcode spikes in PvP. Community threads buzz with people missing the cozy fairy tale vibe. Compared to the original Jump King, this is a whole different beast. The first game was a solo climb with zero handholding. Here, you earn XP, unlock new starter classes, and swap gear mid-run. You trade pure tension for tactical depth. Looking ahead, Nexile's got a Phantom 1.0 update plan for late 2025 to wrap up Act 1, add new bosses, and give the game an ending. Until then, Jump King Quest remains a cult favorite. Next up on our underrated roster is Blade Chimera, Team Ladybug's first fully original Metroidvania, which quietly launched January 16th, 2025 on Steam and Switch. You step into the boots of Shin, a memory-wiped demon hunter, partnered with Lux the Living Sword, tearing through a neon-soaked, cyberpunk Osaka overrun by yokai. It looks and feels like Symphony of the Night's spiritual successor, yet it's stamped with Ladybug's own pixel-perfect flair and ruthless combat loop. I shoved this one into must-play territory because, despite glowing Steam reviews and a killer demo at Next Fest, it barely cut through the noise of early 25 blockbusters. The buzz has been almost unanimously positive. Folks can't stop raving about the crunchy combat, that warp-anywhere fast travel, and multi-phase Titan boss encounters that feel like boss fights X10. Critics love the dynamic music shifts and the way every weapon swap mid-run actually matters. On the flip side, some call out its 8-hour runtime, a plot that leans light on character beats, and a spike around the mid-game where one-shot laser walls will humble you. If you missed it, stick a pin in your wish list. Blade Chimera's blend of pixel artistry, fluid demon slaying, and sweet fast travel makes it the underdog Metroidvania of 2025 you can't afford to sleep on. Next up on our underrated list is Peripetia, a cyberpunk immersive sim that quietly slipped into early access on February 21st. Picture Deus Ex meets Ghost in the Shell, set in a post-Soviet Poland where you play Marie, a cryo-awoken cyborg mercenary trying to carve out a living amid propaganda broadcasts and gas mask thugs. You'll climb neon-soaked rooftops, hack terminals, interrogate informants, and choose between stealth, brute force, or creative problem-solving to complete your contracts. I had to include Peripetia because it's exactly the kind of ambitious indie that flew under most radars. Players praised its razor-sharp world building and tight systems. Manual ammo loading, grid-based inventory, sliding tile hacking puzzles, and a brutalist architecture that oozes atmosphere. The twist? All that micromanagement actually feels immersive once you lean into it. It wasn't all roses. Early adopters flagged janky ladder climbs, occasional AI hiccups in firefights, and a UI that mixes cartoon-style augmentation icons with retro Soviet overlays. But the team's been quick to patch in better tutorials, controller support, and crash fixes, turning what felt rough around the edges in February into something far more polished today. They swapped narrative hand-holding for emergent storytelling. Your decisions carry weight, whether you rescue a broken Android keeper or help a cult of hackers sabotage PSR broadcasts. It's a lean, interactive sim that rewards patience. If you're hungry for a game that trusts you to juggle cyber augmentations, plan each reload, and carve your own path through hostile territory, Peripetia is the underdog 2025 gem you need to play. Alright, sliding into our underrated roundup is Stories from Seoul, The Gundog, a retro-style sci-fi visual novel/graphic adventure that quietly launched on February 20th. You step aboard the Jovian patrol ship JFS Gundog as a rookie security officer, haunted by a mech mishap that wiped out your squad. When a strange distress signal hits the edge of Jupiter's orbit, you roam richly detailed pixel corridors, interrogate a motley crew, solve light puzzles, and navigate branching dialogue that determines allegiances and who lives or dies. I had to include this one because it's criminally overlooked. Despite a very positive tag on Steam and an 80 on Metacritic, it slipped through launch week thanks to a stealthy marketing push. Pre-release demos at Steam Next Fest and Indie Tech showcases earned buzz for its era-accurate PC 98 aesthetic, complete with green screen options, 3 graphic modes, and a thumping chiptune score. Devs delayed an early Q4 2023 window to rebuild their engine, polish UI, and add a full color mode. That extra polish paid off. Players rave over its razor-sharp pixel art, emotive character animations, and a surprisingly weighty narrative about paranoia, PTSD, and mutiny. Critics point to a sluggish first act, occasional pixel hunt puzzles, and a runtime that leaves you wanting more than one playthrough. This was meant to be an anthology, but Gundog's runaway success made it a standalone pilot for future entries. If you're craving a story-driven underdog that trusts you with real choices, immersive world building, and a dare-you-to-look-away mystery, Stories from Seoul, The Gundog is 2025's retro surprise you can't afford to miss. Just remember to save often. The fate of the crew depends on it. Next up on our underrated radar is S4U, a lo-fi visual novel with a twist that quietly launched on Steam January 9th. You slip into the shoes of Mickey, an architect by day and a hired online mouthpiece by night. Rather than mindlessly clicking through text, you actually type your replies in real time across multiple chat windows, juggling work deadlines, side gig crises, and even budding romances under the neon haze of Castor Yard. This one made my list because it's the kind of indie narrative gem that screams cult hit, yet most people slept on it. Over 40 richly written characters, branching storylines, and a soundtrack that grooves to every emotional beat. It's immersive typing mechanic, relatable slice-of-life beats, and that electric tension when your boss, your best friend, and a cheeky AI all ping at once. It reinvents the visual novel formula by turning typing into gameplay and threading real stakes through every keystroke. Trading one-note NPC gags for actual character moments makes the humor land harder and the world feel surprisingly alive. If you've ever lost yourself in late-night chat rooms, yearn for a storytelling experience that trusts you to carry the pace, and want a stealth indie hit that plays like a living chat log, here's one of 2025's most chilling underdogs, Labyrinth of the Demon King. At first glance, it's a retro grimy dungeon crawler set in a demon-infested feudal Japan. You're the last survivor of a betrayed lord, armed with a half-broken katana and willful vengeance. But step inside its claustrophobic one-style corridors, and you'll find something more: tight stamina-driven combat, pulse-pounding stealth sections, and puzzles that thread back through the maze-like castle, sluggish movement, opaque map design, and a difficulty curve that spikes in mid-labyrinth. Solo dev even patched in performance fixes, trimmed respawn annoyances, and added more safe shrines in response to community feedback. One-person vision distilled into 15 to 20 hours of oppressive dread. Labyrinth of the Demon King dares to revivify PS1-era survival horror with modern mechanics, dynamic enemy AI, diverse weapon builds, and genuine tension that rarely lets up. It's the kind of indie title you'll either vow never to play again or obsessively replay, and savoring that grim sense of just one more run. Next on our list is Cabernet, the indie narrative RPG that quietly carved out a niche when it launched in February 2025. You step into the moonlit shoes of Liza, a young vampire wrestling with her dying humanity in a 2D Eastern European-inspired world packed with political intrigue, back-alley feedings, and moral crossroads at every turn. It's part visual novel, part point-and-click, with a modern twist. Your keyboard doubles as a dialogue wheel, and every keystroke can lure a victim or spark an uneasy alliance. I couldn't skip Cabernet because it flies under most radars despite boasting one of the sweetest pixel palettes around and a branching story that actually respects your choices. Pre-launch demos at Steam Next Fest had folks buzzing over its dialogue system and the way artbook details bleed into gameplay. Early reviews praised its build-your-own vampire approach and the subtle creep of its soundtrack. The devs rolled out hotfixes within days, smoothing UI quirks and tightening up the romance routes. Community sentiment has been very positive, with streamers delighted by the game's blend of gothic noir and wry humor. The stakes feel smaller but more personal. Do you seduce a fellow immortal for intel, or spare them and risk exposure? If you love story-first indies that let you play storyteller and villain in one go, suit up for Cabernet. It's the underrated gothic twist of 2025 you never knew you needed. Alright, let's talk about Dolok Town, a side-scrolling, post-apocalyptic farming sim that quietly slipped into early access on May 8th. You play as Prody, a scavenger-turned-farmer, handed a poison plot in a ramshackle settlement made from old rail cars and ruined bridges. Grow crops, automate your homestead, befriend the townsfolk, and peel back the world's mysteries one acid rain season at a time. I had to include Dolok Town because it's the perfect underdog. Stunning pixel art that marries Stardew Valley charm with Fallout grit, layered over a side-scroller that actually lets you stack planters, build drones, and fight off mutated critters. They've patched in better UI scaling, added more safe shrines, and even teased a Steam Workshop roadmap after fans clamor for mods. The most recent hotfix fine-tuned performance on Steam Deck and introduced dialogue history. Players rave about the deep systems, vertical farming, dynamic weather threats, and a tech tree that turns your farm into a fully automated fortress. Lack of fast travel, occasional frame stutters and fog of war, and a tutorial that hands you a drone without much teaching. That mid-game backtracking can feel tedious, but the devs have promised more QL tweaks before full launch in early 2026. Dolok Town stands alone by weaving cozy, slice-of-life beats into a gritty, dystopian rhythm. If you're craving a farming sim that dares to make you sweat through acid storms and celebrate a perfectly timed harvest, Dolok Town is the hidden indie gem you gotta play. Next up is Blood Typer, the keyboard-only survival horror that snuck onto Steam on February and quietly earned a cult following. Explore a cursed film studio, typing words to move, pick up items, and even blast zombies. I had to include Blood Typers because it's the kind of bold indie that flies under most gamers' radars. Early trailers promised a mashup of typing of the Dead's Bizarro keyboard combat and Resident Evil Outbreak's co-op dread. Once it dropped, streams lit up as people realized this wasn't a one-note gimmick, but a full-fledged survival horror with procedurally shuffled maps that keep each 30-minute run feeling fresh. Outer Brain Studios capped things off with the Scarlet Finale update, adding the last story mission, a public server browser, achievements, and quality of life tweaks like proper save slots and smoother voice chat. That said, it isn't perfect. Some characters' perks feel underwhelming. Save points can be sparse, and solo runs lean into frustration when 5 zombies surround you mid-spell. The difficulty spike around Chapter 3 turned a few streams into rage quits, yet it's an undeniable evolution from past typing titles. It trades typing of the Dead's on-rail simplicity for open levels, RPG-like character stats, and co-op insanity. Sol Sesto is one of 2025's most quietly brilliant releases. It dropped into early access on May 27th. You pick a hero, descend into a randomized dungeon, and every move is a gamble. Each row you choose lands you on one of 4 tiles, and that can mean treasure, traps, or a monster with a vendetta. It's like playing chess while blindfolded and occasionally being punched by the board. I included Sol Sesto because it's one of those games that looks simple on the surface but hides layers of tactical depth. The Cursed Teeth system is a standout. Stone teeth tweak your odds, metal ones trigger wild effects, and the whole thing feels like you're building a deck of probability modifiers. Add in magical fountain items, character-specific powers, and a roguelite progression system built around constellation upgrades. And you've got a game that rewards experimentation without overwhelming you. And players have been praising the art style. Think comic books surrealism meets dungeon grime. The clever enemy mechanics, and the way each run feels genuinely different. Early biomes lacked boss variety, and the final boss being a Reskin didn't exactly scream epic conclusion. Others flagged pacing issues, like slow coin dumping animations or underwhelming item incentives compared to permanent upgrades. But the devs have been patching fast, adding new characters, tweaking UI, and even teasing Steam Workshop support for custom dungeon layouts. If you're into games that turn randomness into a skill test, Sol Sesto is the indie roguelite you shouldn't sleep on. No Skin is one of those indie horror roguelikes that feels like it crawled out of a cursed VHS tape and into your Steam library. You play as Noir, a girl accused by a skinless entity of stealing his flesh. He gives you a few items and then yeets you into a surreal nightmare house filled with cultists, stitched-up friends, and enemies that explode just to spite you. It's part psychological horror, part turn-based strategy, and the community's been dissecting its lore like it's a From Software title. The game's experimental art style mixes pixel characters with real-world photo backgrounds, and it somehow works. The combat's deceptively deep, with status effects, item synergies, and a faith-level system that cranks up difficulty modifiers like reduced healing and enemies starting with shields. It's got that Slay the Spire energy, but filtered through a Junji Ito lens. Love the atmosphere, the replayability, and the sheer amount of secrets. Alternate endings, and even a hidden boss fight with the dev himself if you reach 148% skin recovery. It's weird, it's bold, and it's exactly the kind of indie gem that deserves more love. Let's talk about Mudborn, Frog Management Sim, the game that asks the age-old question, what if you woke up from hibernation and your pond was absolutely wrecked? And also, you were a frog? Released on March 20th, World Frog Day, this cozy but chaotic nature sim from Teengineers lets you breed frogs, cultivate mushrooms, and restore a broken ecosystem using the power of genetics and a whole lot of slimy charm. I included Mudborn because it's the kind of indie that quietly hops into early access and then refuses to leave your brain. Frogs with tiny hats, mushroom modifiers that mess with DNA, and puzzles that require actual algebra. Mudborn dives into generational puzzles and trait-based breeding. The game even lets you hop between dream realms to solve puzzles and unlock new frog species. Some folks found the early game a bit punishing, especially when breeding requirements get math-heavy, and the UI can be finicky when placing objects near plants. But the devs have been patching fast, adding QL tweaks, new frog furniture, and even Steam Workshop support. If you're into cozy Sims with a weird edge, Mudborn is the amphibious underdog of 2025 you need to play. Just be ready to drug some frog babies and do algebra. You've been warned.